Are you looking for true personal freedom? The freedom to design a life you truly desire? Then you're absolutely in the right place. True personal freedom comes from when you take 100% responsibility and control of your money and your mind. Here, you're going to learn ideas, tips, and wisdom that's going to help you bridge the gap from where you are now to your dream life in the future. My name is Randy Wilson, and welcome to the Rich Mind Podcast. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Rich Mind Podcast. And today I have another fantastic guest. I have with us today Shannon Robnett. Shannon is from Boise, Idaho. He is a successful syndicator, a real estate developer, a real estate investor. He's actually even a pilot, if you can imagine that. They actually let him up in the sky to fly around with us. Yeah, can you imagine that? Yeah, when you get to hear from Shannon here, you're going to understand kind of why I'm even saying that. But yeah, Shannon's just a great guy. We met a couple of years ago on the summit with Belize and the real estate guys down in Belize, the Summit on Sand. And he's just a fantastic human. He's a lot of fun to be with. I'm super excited about this conversation. So Shannon, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Randy. It's always good to see you.
Yeah. So can you take just a few minutes? Can you give everybody a little bit of, I told everybody you were a pilot there, but is there other things about you? Can you just give everybody a little bit of background about you?
Yeah, I grew up in a household that resembled the Poor Dad household in Kiyosaki's book. My parents were talking real estate at the dinner table all the time. And I wanted to go to college and I wanted to get a degree. Wasn't able to do that. Something about having to show up every day and pay attention in class just didn't fit for me. But I'm a second generation builder developer and a fourth generation realtor. And I've been involved in construction and development for over 28 years. And it wasn't until about 3 years ago that I really got into syndication because the projects we were doing were larger than single check writers wanted to participate in, at least at terms that I was willing to take. And but I've built everything from police stations to hospitals to schools, city halls, fire stations, and just about everything in between. And so my resume on that side is pretty strong. And then when we got into capital raising, it was easy to kind of create that story. But that's just kind of my deal. And yes, I'm a third generation pilot too. So my son is a fifth generation realtor, fourth generation pilot. We're just kind of generational people, I guess, Randy.
That's awesome. So in case anybody isn't familiar with the term syndication or syndicator, I think that we maybe discussed it before, but since you kind of brought that up with your story there, can you give just a little bit of feedback or background as far as what that is or kind of help some people connect some dots there?
The easiest way to explain it is just syndicator is a fancy word for partnership. And really what happens is you have someone who is going to do all the work, right? And this is where a lot of partnerships tend to fall apart is there's not a clear definition of what the work is. Yes, Randy, you and I are going to go into business, man, and we're going to do this and you're going to do this and I'm going to do that. Well, in real estate or in investing, syndication is an opportunity for people who have capital to partner with people who have business experience and deal flow. And so as a passive investor in that, you have capital and you're looking for tax advantages, you're looking for cash flow, you're looking for appreciation. And in my line of work, I'm building buildings, I'm developing multifamily projects, we're doing industrial, and we're able to put that capital to work in a way that allows you to maximize your returns while minimizing your efforts. So if you happen to be a person with a high net worth or a high W-2 job that keeps you busy and you don't want to get into being a property manager and trying to find deals and you just want to do your job that you're really good at, then partnering with somebody in a syndication is an opportunity to do that. And it really is a great vehicle because it allows people to use their expertise to make the money that they want to put into deals that allow someone else to use their expertise to make the money they want.
I love that. So the idea of just partnership, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times we can get stuck in the idea that we have to do it all on our own, right? We have to go out there and find the deal, package the deal, fund the deal, operate the deal, right? That's kind of a lot of times we're fed those ideas. And this is actually the complete opposite, right? You're partnering with people with expertise that have other expertise and friends and things. And then you come together as a collective for a win-win all the way around.
Well, and if you really think about it, if you're a doctor, and you're making three or 400, $500,000 a year, you can't afford to be a real estate investor full time. It's really difficult, especially in the beginning, because you have things that you need to take care of. You've got overhead, you've got a staff that you've got to employ. By the time you get done with all that, you've worked your 40 or 50 hours a week. You've got this income, you've got a tax problem. For you to go become another expert in that area is going to seriously diminish your practice and what you're making there. So this is an opportunity for you to continue to do what you do, partner with people that help you find, identify, invest, receive all the benefits that real estate and other investments can have for you, while still maintaining your high level of personal income.
That's super exciting. So that's where I'm super excited to have you on the show. Share your knowledge, share your wisdom
Yeah.
with the listeners, because yeah, it's super valuable. Just to understanding that that's even a possibility can be eye-opening to folks, and I hope that will resonate with some people. So let's dive into the questions here real quick. I always
Okay.
love to dig into these to kind of get a little more texture to who you are, kind of where you've been, that kind of thing. And the first question is, who has had the biggest influence on your life?
It's my parents. I mean, I even told Robert Kiyosaki that his book was pretty unimpressive to me because it had just explained my childhood. I didn't realize what I was observing at the dinner table. Hey, I was talking to the Smiths and they're, wanting to sell their house and move their business past the mashed potatoes. That was my normal evening. And yet when I read that book, I was 19 years old and I'm like, why is this book changing the world? Why is everybody so up in arms about this book? But I didn't realize, I mean, my kids, or me as a kid, I listened to my parents talk about 1031s, probably like Charlie Sheen's kids saw him buying Coke. It was just the normal thing to do, and yet I grew up in that and it was just my normal. And what I got away from when I started being 25, 27 out on my own, I started to see the knowledge that I gained that was second nature to me as a kid was imperative to my survival and my journey, that's put me where I'm at today. Absolutely.
So in that journey, I know that I guarantee there's been some ups and some downs, which kind of
Yeah.
leads us into the second question then is, what's
Yeah.
been your biggest challenge and what is it that you've learned from that challenge?
You know, um, I think my biggest challenge, and I think most small business owners, medium-sized business owners can attest to this. Uh, the best, the biggest challenge is the human factor, the employee. When you rely on others, you give them the opportunity to fail you. And when your business is only as good as your weakest link, you can be challenged to grow in areas that your business is demanding because the personnel is not there. And it will always show you, business will always show you where your weaknesses are. And so the biggest challenge is always just to make sure you've got the right people, you pay well for them, you make sure that they're loyal, those kinds of things, because that will absolutely make and break your business.
That's awesome. Yeah. So the people, the partnerships, right? Not only are you partnering with
Absolutely.
people on the outside, but then your internal
Yeah,
partnerships are just as important, if not more important, because without them, your
absolutely.
operations are going to suffer for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one thing that I always love to do is try to, you've got kids, my kids are in their 20s, you've got younger kids as well. So one thing I always try to do is try to give back as much as we possibly can, right? You mentioned about having in your household growing up that talks about 1031 exchanges and just the business lifestyle. Is there anything you can think of that you wish you could have given yourself back in when you were 20? Just a nugget of wisdom, something you can share with your younger self. It's that old saying that, hindsight's 2020. Is there anything that you can think of today, knowing what you've learned in your journey, that you wish you would have known when you were 20?
Yeah, well, the first thing I would have done is gone and got a job. I've never had a job in my adult life. I've always worked for myself, and run my own companies, but I never saw systems. I never saw, it would have been awesome to have gone to work for another developer or another builder, and figured out how they structured things, how they did things. I say this often, every dollar I've made came from a mistake, right? I learned everything the hard way. I mean, I got the knots on my head and the welts on my back to prove it. And if I would have put my pride aside and instead of always being my own man, gone to work for somebody else, seen what they know, learned from them, picked up the things that were great about their business and the things that I would probably change about their business, and then brought that to my own at some time in my 30s, I have no doubt, absolutely no doubt whatsoever, I would be farther along than I am now. And you mentioned it earlier in the show about, doing things your own way. And there's a lot to be said about that. But at the other side of that coin is there is so much to be said about learning from the mistakes of others and learning from people who have been down that road and taken that journey that you don't have to go yourself. You don't have to take every lump on your own.
So is there any particular systems that you've learned in your journey as far as your development, as far as your personal, not personal development, but your business development, your real estate development pieces? Is there anything in particular that you have learned that uh, has been instrumental in your growth from where you were
One
to
of
where
the
you are
things
now?
that I'm learning as I approach 50 is that you don't have to do it all yourself, like you said, right? I mean, some of the things that I can do, somebody else can do better, right? And just because you can do it cheaper, cheaper does not equal better, right? And so I can do it myself and I can do it cheaper, but it doesn't necessarily mean I can do it better. And if I'm really looking for optimum results, which in real estate and investing, it's return on investment. And I look at it and I could go, man, I could do it cheaper. I could do it faster. I could do it this, I could do it that, but I can't do it better, which means that I can't make as much money. Why would I do that? And that's a tough thing for me as a self-made person to think that I don't have to do this part of the deal. I don't have to do that part of the deal. I can hire these people to do that. And at first you look at it and you go, man, that's a lot of money. And then you look at it and go, but I bought back a day and a half of my time. And in that day and a half, I can do this, you know, and I can really maximize what I'm doing. I talk with people all the time about maximizing what they do to allow them to generate income through their day jobs to invest to get to their retirement. And yet for a long time in my own life, I didn't practice that. Right. I mean, I was the preacher. I was letting you know what you got to do not to go to hell. And here I was doing all the things that were in a lot of cases very detrimental to my business because I wasn't focused on the fact that I can do it, but should I?
Absolutely. There again, giving up that control sometimes
Yeah,
is the most difficult thing to do in the wide world as a business owner, but at the same time, it can speed up the process of acceleration so much more.
absolutely. And then
Absolutely.
the other thing that you can do is you can eliminate some of the bad habits in your company by partnering with companies who do have the systems figured out, that do have the connections, that do have the ability to pull in major players in different markets that you can't access. And there's a lot of that comes from collaboration and from partnership that comes through that ability to not be always the single answer, the only answer to all your problems.
I know you network a lot, right? You're always at different events. That's where we
Yeah,
met, right?
yeah.
So the importance of that even, right? Meeting the people, getting in the right rooms, that's something I advocate a lot here on the show to the listeners. And maybe you can speak to that as well. You travel more than I do. And I feel like I'm at a lot of different things, but you're part more to trade and that kind of thing. But at the same time, can you speak to the importance of getting in the rooms, shaking the hands, meeting the different individuals, even if it's from different walks of life? It's like you and I, we don't do the same things, but at the same time, we've hit it off. We've made, a relationship.
Yeah.
We've helped each other. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I do. I travel to at least 2 events a month. Usually I try to get to 3 because it's not what you know, it's who, right? And I can tell you this hands down. The things that have come about in my life have come because of the relationships, not necessarily my primary knowledge. Now, my primary knowledge was able to engage in the conversation, but it was only after I knew the people, after I'd met the people, after I talked with the people. And, the reality is you can learn so much when you're trying to be a student. It's really hard for you to learn when you're trying to be the teacher. And if you're in the room and you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. You need to be in a room full of people that are way smarter than you. Number one, hopefully somebody will take a picture of you in that room full of smart people. And if you're not saying anything, they will make the assumption that you're as smart as those other people, right? And so when you've done that and you've got that figured out, then you're going to be able to put yourself in the position that now you're learning from them. Now you're able to mentor with them. Now you're able to learn what they know, take that shortcut. And if you're not showing up for that, where are you going to get that information? You're going to get that information from a book. I mean, you can, but where's the practical application? Where's the connection? Where's the ability to pick up the phone and call someone that has that particular experience, or meet someone that knows someone? I mean, I'm headed back next week to a deal in Nashville on a guy that I had no clue even existed on this planet 8 months ago, that I've connected with through another person, that if I hadn't gone to events, I wouldn't know this person. I mean, it's a $15 million deal. I got another deal happening in Houston that the financing is a complete slam dunk because of an introduction I was made through another person at a different event. And it's just these kinds of things. And you absolutely cannot put a price on it. And if you're looking at it saying, where's my ROI at the end of this event? You're probably looking at it wrong, right? But when you're going to those kinds of things and you're engaging with the people that are doing what you're doing, even at your level or a higher level, you're talking with the people that understand what your struggles are, understand what your options are, and have been down a path from a different angle. It's amazing what you can come away with at the end of a weekend.
And I can attest to that 100%.
Yeah.
Like I said, that kind of goes along with how we've met. So
Right.
The idea then, Shannon, is when you say somebody is, okay, listening to us and saying, great, that sounds great. I'm going to try to get into more rooms, more events. We're a little bit more seasoned, right? We've had more opportunities to get in the rooms. Do you have any strategies? And maybe that's a little bit more of a harsh word than what I'm looking for, but just when you show up in a room that you don't know anybody, do you have any advice as to how do you begin conversations with folks? Does that make any sense? As far as like, if you're showing up in a brand new room that you're not familiar with anybody that's there, do you have any advice as far as to how do you get started with starting some conversations with folks to be able to break the ice, to be able to have those conversations and start making those relationships? Any ideas about that at all?
I don't like, I'm naturally a shy person. I like sitting in the back. I like leaving early. I don't like engaging people. I don't like asking them for a favor. I don't like talking to them. But the thing that's made it really easy for me is practice, but also to ask people about themselves. In Dale Carnegie's book, he talks about in How to Win Friends and Influence People, he talks about it, the people that are the best conversationalists when asked afterwards are the people that ask about you, the people that engage you, that want to know more about you. And the reality is, if you approach that room like a Rolodex, and you're there to meet people for their ability to help you later, their ability to be a piece of your puzzle later, you have to know who's in the room. You have to know what they do. You have to know what they're looking for. I have a gentleman that is getting ready to come on with us full time that called me out of the blue. He moved here from New Zealand, found my podcast in New Zealand somehow, was listening to that, realized I lived in the city that he was going to come live in with his new bride. And he has spent all of his time figuring out what I do. And when he walked into my office, he knew exactly how he could fit into my organization. And so he was able to, through figuring out about me, was able to find the niche that he would fit in great. And his resume came through the door perfect for the spot I had, right? And so if you look at it that way, that you're not interviewing that person on how you can give them your deal or sell them your coaching program or get them to buy a copy of this or do that or invest over here, but you're looking at it from the place that you can come in and say, I want to know how I can help you. Well, then that person does two things. They'll tell you, number one, and then you can do what Russ and Robert say, be important to important people. You can also come in and you can learn about them and see how they do what they're doing. And you can then figure out where you can introduce them to somebody else that might have what they were talking about wanting, even if you don't. And then that person will feel like they owe you one. And it's always great to have people owe you one, right? Because then they're, hey, that time I hooked you up with that really great deal? Yeah, man, I never forgot that. I'm looking for a X, Y, and Z. right?
That's how it works, right? That
Yeah,
reciprocal part, showing up, trying to add value first without
absolutely.
anything in an expectation in return.
Absolutely.
That's how I have approached showing up. And I can tell you that, folks, that it's been the return on that. You can't put a number to it because you
No,
don't know exactly what that means. But
right.
for example, even us, Shannon, you reached out with an opportunity for me to try to help someone that you knew,
Yep.
that whether I did or not, that remains to be seen. But the point is that we're helping each other help others, which
Yeah.
is going to at some point come back in
And you
that
never
return.
know who that person knows that will be able to help you at some point. Absolutely. And it's that, giver's gain is the theme of BNI, which is a business networking group. But it's that whole thought process of, if you're walking into the room thinking how you can sell this to somebody, you're never going to win like you can if you walk into a room and say, how can I solve 300 people's problems? How
That's
can
right.
I help every single one of these people? Because at that level, you're connecting with them on a level that matters.
And that's where the return comes from. You mentioned that the
Absolutely.
ROI from the investment, right? Because that's basically what it is. When you invest the time and the energy and the money to show up at these events, Russell Gray, part of the real estate guys, he talks about one thing that always resonated with me is that you cannot, it's not what the event costs you, what costs you by not being in the room is what's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
And I understand that folks, when they're first hearing these types of things, they might have a little pushback because sometimes the dollar amounts can be a little more, or because the time constraints could be
Yeah.
a little bit more challenging. But at the end of the
Absolutely.
day, you can't put a price tag on the ability to shake hands, meet folks, great people from all over the country, all over the world. Uh, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
Absolutely. So one thing that I know, that being a developer, you've got your pulse on what's going on. You have to, right? I mean, things are
I try to.
pivoting. Yeah, well, I'm sure it's happening fast and furious with everything that's going on in the world. So one thing I wanted to kind of just pick your brain on, and so part of the conversation that I like to have on the podcast is just the financial education piece, right? Just trying to keep with the basics for myself, but at the same time, trying to go as deep as I possibly can to try to help folks navigate kind of the uncertain times that we're kind of going through. I know you were in business and have been in business for quite some time and went through 2008. Uh, all of those challenges that arose that we might be experiencing similar. So I just wanted to get your opinion. Do you have any feedback or any ideas of kind of what you're seeing right now, at least out there in the Boise area for yourself?
Well, we're in Washington, Idaho, Texas, Florida, looking at a couple other markets as well. But the thing that I'm seeing that is very, very dissimilar to 2008, it is a market slowdown. There is a market correction. Though that is really, in my opinion, where the similarities end. We have a housing shortage that was created out of the lack of liquidity in financial institutions in 9, 10, 11, and 12. And so we underbuilt what was necessary. So when you look at good, strong markets, when you look at Florida, when you look at Texas, when you look at, like Austin in particular, where you have, a lot of, Tesla moving to Austin, you have, things expanding in Austin. You're seeing that the housing shortage is now showing up there. When you look at areas like Detroit, you have not a lot going on in Detroit, and there's not a lot of demand there, but there's still fairly decent trade of the class C and D apartments that are happening, and there will be some growth there. But what we have now, in 2008, we had an equilibrium between supply and demand. And then when people were losing their houses, what a lot of your listeners might not know is that the foreclosure rate in 2010 was less than 6%.
Hmm.
It was up 3%, 2.5% over what it used to be, what the normal is of 3%. But what happened in conjunction with that is the liquidity crisis that happened, where banks quit lending. They had bad assets on their books. They had things that were making them fearful of the FDIC. And when all of that stuff cataclysmically slammed together, and then we had the world financial market meltdown because of Lehman Brothers and a lot of that other stuff, then all of the ability to borrow money went away. Everybody's saying that our market, oh my gosh, I can't believe how expensive money is. Randy, I've done business for almost 30 years, and I've only had 2 years in my whole career that have had interest rates under 5% for any length of time, you know, on the development side. On the residential side, I think we had rates of 5% from about 17 to 20, middle of 22, and then we exceeded that. But it was a very, very short window. So when people are looking at it going, oh my gosh, I can't believe how high rates are, they're normal, you know? And so when you were looking at the lens of, I got involved in 2018 in industrial development, or, you know, in multifamily investing or whatever, you see a very narrow window. But when you look at historically what interest rates are, they're still very good. And it's all about making the cash flow or the arbitrage between what you bought it at, what you financed it at, and what the rents are. And so when we see really strong housing demands, we're somewhere between 4 and 7 million units of housing short in America. And obviously, like I touched on, places like Detroit don't need any more. Places like Chicago, they don't need any more housing right now. But you've got places like Florida where the people from Chicago are moving to. You've got places like Austin, Texas, Dallas, you know, Tennessee market is exploding. North Carolina market is exploding. And they not only don't have enough product for what the growth is in there, they've got a lot of people importing from other areas that are causing that growth. And so what you're seeing is you're seeing demand and supply and demand. You know how that ratio works. The more there's demand and the lower the supply is, the higher the price. And there comes that equilibrium where once you get to that medium where you've got supply and demand in check, which I think is still 3 years at a minimum, 3 years out. And my friend Ken McElroy would agree with us that it's at least 3 years out for supply and demand to meet. When that happens, then you start to see maybe a real softening and a slowdown in the market. But until you see that, you have velocity. And as long as you have velocity in conjunction with funding, you'll see deals continue to get done. And when deals are still getting done, money's still being made. And it's really hard to argue with those fundamentals.
So the piece that you mentioned there, and you kind of touched on at the end as well, is that the funding to me is just, it's just as much an important piece as the supply and demand, right? Because without funding, deals can't get done. Are you seeing anything? You mentioned about 2008, where 2009, 10, as far as the funding dried up along with the, you know, all the mess that was going on. Are you seeing anything out there right now with funding from institutions at all, with getting the capital needed to purchase these deals and get them done?
No, I mean, I think there's a lot of people that got into deals in 2020, in 2021, that they're going, man, I'm losing money. Well, you paid too much for it. You didn't lock in your interest rate. You know, you did some basic things that you shouldn't have done. And now you're going to pay a financial price for that. But that has nothing to do with the liquidity. You can still get loans. I mean, you can still get lots of financing options available to you. It's just a matter of, can you substantiate the cash flow? Can you reach, you know, everybody's come up with this new term to them of the DSCR lending. We've always had debt service coverage ratios in all of our loans. But when you're applying 2.5% interest, it's not hard to meet that debt service coverage. But all that means is that the bank wants to see that if you owe them $1, you've got $1.25 in rents coming in to make sure that they can get paid, because they don't want your asset back, right? And so when you look at how that balances and you look at what's going on, there are people that overpaid, and there was prices that were too high, and people were able to do it because the funding parameters were there that are no longer there. Real estate's a constantly changing environment, but the rules stay the same. You take your income, you take your rents minus your expenses, and that's your net profit. And as long as that is part of what's going on and your lending fits inside that parameter, you'll still see deals get done. So I think when you know, we're starting to see some multifamily assets come back to the bank. There was a large foreclosure auction of $225 million worth of real estate in Houston about 2 weeks ago, kind of shook the multifamily market. It was a syndicator that had been in business less than 3 years. He'd owned the assets less than a year, but he had violated those fundamental lending laws that are the CYA of keeping your assets, right? And we'll leave all those puns all wrapped up in one little spot. We won't unravel those right now, will we, Randy?
No, not
But
today.
you know, the thing is, if you understand how underwriting plays into this, funding is not an issue.
So then I would assume somebody with your experience, your backgrounds, you're seeing these opportunities are going to start coming and bubbling to the surface, so to speak.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're looking for in the next 2 to 3 in the different spaces, whether it be multifamily or anything for that matter? I don't want to put words in
Yeah.
your mouth. Is that kind of the opportunity that you're kind of sitting back? Not only are you doing deals, I'm not saying you're sitting on your hands doing nothing, but at the
Oh
same
no, I
time,
couldn't do that.
you're thinking about uh, what's coming down the pipe, right? I
Yeah.
assume.
I am. And, there's still good deals to be done. I mean, we've got, about 700 units in planning that we'll probably bring through the pipe in the next 18 months for starting on multifamily. We've got 2 large industrial developments that we're getting ready to launch. We're buying cash flowing assets. Currently, we love the Houston market for cash flowing industrial assets, but we are starting to see some where, you know, um, when you look at, let's take it back to maybe a level that your audience could really identify with. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath house at $200,000 at 5% is going to run you a mortgage payment of about $1,750. That same house now is $400,000 in my market, $450,000. The interest rate is now 7%, and that payment is now about $3,400. It's the same asset, right? So what's going to naturally happen is, in order for the average person that wants and needs that 3-bedroom, 2-bath house to afford it, the lending rate is going to put downward pressure on the price to bring down the payment, because America thinks in payment plans, right? When was the last time you went on a car lot and the guy told you that car is $42,500? He told you that car is $431 a month,
Right.
right? So we run that thought process in our mind, except for when we come to buying assets. And then we go, well, I got to buy the whole thing. No, you don't. You're getting lending involved on it. So when you really break that down and you say, what's causing prices to come down? It's interest rates, and the cash flow that's left in the middle isn't enough to debt service. So if you really want to sell and I really want to buy, but I still have to borrow, your price has to come down for me to be able to afford it in that matrix, right? And so when you see that come together, you're just offsetting some of the market conditions. And so you're going to see assets lessen in price while still increase in rents, because that's where the funding is happening in the mortgage in the middle, that's allowing people to transact. So people that paid, I sold an asset in January of last year at a 3.7 cap. It was ridiculous, right? I mean, I couldn't have afforded to keep it. Now that asset's probably a 5 cap based on lending. It doesn't mean they lost value. They still have the same cash flow if they locked in their lending, which I know they did. So they're fine. But the other person that didn't, they've had a real recession in their cash flow that may be costing them money every month because of their lending choices, that now that asset's going to come back on the market and be able to be repositioned, even though the rents are still there. It's just the cash flow is mitigated.
So will it be a matter of pain points, meaning how long that syndicator or person that's running that deal can hang on, right?
Yeah.
Hanging on for dear life.
Yeah.
And that's where the patience comes in, right? The ability to sit on the sidelines, be active, right? But at the same time, be prepared to solve that person's problem, because that's basically what you're doing, right? You're helping this person out of a problem that, yeah, it has to make sense for both sides, right? He's not going to be able to get away, or he or she scot-free. But at the same time, yeah, it's got to make sense for the person that's taking over that asset to make sure that it's going to be able to cover that debt, like you're talking about as well, with the higher interest rates.
Well, and if you look at that deal in Houston that got repossessed, we were looking at it, and it looks like one of the assets was purchased in August of last year. And for that to already have gone through a foreclosure auction means that he never even made a full payment, not one. So by the time he closed on it, he had a negative cash flow, right? And whether that was through occupancy trends, whether that was through, his business plan was not accurate, whatever it was, I don't know. And it's irrelevant. But the point is, when you put that together, there's a lot of people that won't touch a deal unless it cash flows day one. There was a lot of people in 19, 20, 21, 22 that were buying assets that wouldn't cash flow until year 2 or 3. They were planning on doing a cash out refinance, getting all the investors' money back. And you can do amazing things with a spreadsheet that don't have any connection in reality. If you want an example of that, look at the news, right? Um, I mean, just because it's on paper doesn't mean it's real, but the reality of it is it has to cash flow it today, and it needs to have certain parameters around it that are real and that are realistic. And when you put all that together, you will get a very strong understanding of what this asset should be priced at and what this asset will do for you or could do to you if you don't really understand your underwriting.
100%, which almost brings us back 100% full circle from the very beginning of the conversation as far as the partnerships, right?
Yeah.
Knowing who you were getting in partnerships with, right?
Yeah.
Going with somebody that has a track record.
Right.
It's not going to be perfect all the time, right? You've got to
Yeah.
understand that investing is risky, right? But
Can be.
finding the right person that's been through the ups, the downs, seen different cycles, seen different interest rates, right? All the things that we're talking about, right, is crucial
Yeah.
to having any kind of success. I would assume there again, like I said,
Yeah.
bringing that back around full circle.
But, you know, just to kind of add another layer to this, my dad was building houses in the late 70s when interest rates were 18%, and he was still able to build houses and make money. Why? Because people wanted the house that bad. Was it slower than it had been? Sure. Did it accelerate when interest rates came down? Of course. But it didn't mean that nothing happened, you know? And so when you look at those market cycles, it's about being in the right position. And, you know, I know a lot of people that didn't buy anything last year. You know, I know a lot of people that just said, I cannot afford to, because in their model, it didn't work. And that doesn't mean you go buy it and make a new model that looks good enough that this will work, because it may not be based in reality.
100%. That's awesome, Shannon. I really appreciate everything you're sharing so far. Is there any other type of thing that's really been, whether it's in your business or things you're noticing with different things that you're going to, right? Kind of the talk of the rooms that you've been in to share with the listeners that would almost just kind of put the icing on the cake as far as everything we've been discussing so far.
You know, if we want to stay on the topic of where pricing is going, I think we've seen, you know, a 10 to 15% drop in overall pricing. I know in our market, we have on single family homes and on multifamily, but you know, when you look at the fact that over the last 4 years, we've seen I think it was a 47% price increase in single family homes in 36 months, right? But if anybody was to apply that to, let's call it Apple stock or Tesla stock, and it went up 47% in a 3-year period and dropped 15%, of course, the news would sensationalize it a little bit, but your overall return is not hammered if you've been in it long term. Even if you bought it at the peak of the market, you only lose money when you sell. It's just a question of how long have you prepared yourself to be able to hang on through this next time period. And I think a lot of people are waiting for 40% discounts. I don't think we'll see those because the supply and demand is going to interrupt that. If we were oversupplied again, I think you would see that. You know, the Phoenix market in 2008, the Vegas market in 2008, they saw 40 to 60% drop in pricing, but they were oversupplied and the bottom fell out and there was no liquidity. So they saw that race to the bottom because there was nobody to buy the houses. Here, we've got plenty of people around with dry powder that are ready to pick these up. It's just a matter of how far are they going to go until they fit back into my parameters and my business model that then I can take them on, right? So
and that's where your 2 to 3 year somewhat, I mean, I know that's probably more of an idea or a theory in your own mind. That's kind of what you're thinking for yourself as far as that 2 to 3 year time point.
You know, and the brilliant business minds that are even, you know, farther up the food chain than myself say that, you know, we're in the second inning of an 8 or 9 inning ball game, you know, and you're talking about the 7th inning is when all the banks get the assets back, right? So we're still going to see deals sweeten up. We're going to see things come along. But again, if it doesn't make sense and it doesn't cash flow, if it doesn't meet your investment parameters, you really probably shouldn't be forcing a deal right now just to have done a deal.
So I know I'm huge, and I know you are as well, on the education piece when it comes to, so that's the idea, right? This is the time to get educated. If what we're speaking about today, folks, is somewhat higher level for you, that's the whole point. You need to learn to understand what these topics are, what this discussion even means. Shannon threw around cap rates, DSCRs, all kinds of terms that if you're in the real estate space, or if you're interested in the real estate space, you need to learn what that is and what those terms mean. We did cover a little bit of that today, but the whole point is that now's the time to get educated. And I know you're big on that as well with your social media. You're huge on social media.
Yeah.
You've got your own podcast. Can you talk a little bit about that, how you're trying to help folks get educated
Yeah.
and even get prepared for what's coming up next?
My thing is, I truly believe that 2008 would not have happened if we had a better educated investor. If people really understood the fundamentals of investing, which aren't taught in school, Morgan Stanley, Charles Schwab, those guys are not there to help you. They're there to pillage you. And so when you really look at what an education you need, I was talking with somebody else that in their $100,000 401k, they'd lost $30,000 this year. And I just thought to myself, how many events could you have gone to? How much education could you have bought for that? And not only still been in the same financial position, but had the knowledge to never be in that position again. And yet people continue to choose to, elect to put that away and do that and put it off on somebody else to make that, instead of really educating themselves and understanding the fallacies behind what they're being sold. Because, when you look at how that all comes together, if you're not educating yourself, somebody's educating you. And I would argue that if you're not educating yourself, someone is indoctrinating you, right? Because there's no two ways about it. There is no neutral ground. And so if you're not taking that on yourself, you can't expect anyone else to do it in your best interest. They'll do it in their best interest. But if you want to take control of that and understand it, and then decide what is in your best interest, the only way to do that is to educate yourself. So I do a podcast as well. It's called the Robnett Real Estate Rundown. And it is for, we get into some more advanced topics. We get into kind of the level of the market where it's at. And that's because I truly believe that my give back is to help educate. And if there's anything I can do to help you along your real estate journey, I believe that ripple effect of one investor, two investors, four investors, it becomes something. And out of that something, you can really make change. And that change in the market, that safety in the market, is what creates stability in the market. Fear is what drives our markets up and down and sideways 80% of the time. And yet we fear what we don't know. And so that education piece should be in there very prominently to make sure that we're all aware of what we're doing and why we're doing it.
100%. So the fear, and you said that right, the fear is because of the unknown. And once you become aware that there are different ways of doing it, even the discussion that we've had today, once you become aware that it's a possibility, get yourself educated, you can take different action, which is going to create a different result, which then you can begin to give back, which then is going to create that ripple effect, right? It goes on and on and on and on and on, which is why it's so much fun.
Yeah. Well, and then when you can see the difference that you've made in someone's life, you see where somebody took that little bit of knowledge and added that with somebody else that something else that Chuck said, or that, Sarah said, or whatever, and they're able to grow themselves, and then look at that ripple effect of who they can affect, right?
You just never know where it's going to end up. And that's what
you
makes
don't,
it so much
you
fun.
really don't.
That's what makes even doing this, right? Having these conversations, doing
right.
it's where it's so much fun, because you just don't know where it's going to go. Even when I hit record today, I told you from the very beginning, I didn't know exactly where it was going to go, but I knew it was going to get exactly where it needed to be. And that's exactly what we've done. So I totally appreciate that. So folks are like,
Randy, if you look at your own journey as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know I met you 2 years ago, 2 years ago, this coming July. You would have never pictured yourself in this capacity. You would never have pictured your whole thing. You have completely rebranded yourself based on what you've educated yourself to be. And you've become a much more enlightened person that now sees more clearly how to help and affect others, and I've watched you on your journey and how you have grown, but it's only after you've ingested the knowledge. When you brought your kids to the summit and how they've ingested the knowledge, and now they're making their own decisions. And I've watched you and your wife and the way that you guys have put this whole thing together, and the thought process and everything that you're doing that's making this your reality based on how you see the world and how you've educated yourself. And now your choice is to reach out and to help others educate themselves, not because you're selling a product, but because you're trying to affect change at a grassroots level. And that is to be commended. Absolutely 100%.
I really appreciate that, Shannon. Coming from you, man. That means a lot. Yeah, it's been a fun journey. It's been a blast to take the things I'm learning and try to apply them in a ways that I can communicate them better, differently, right? Bringing on friends like you that can even take it that another step further.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of fun. Creating this podcast has probably been one of the most fun things I've ever done. So yeah, I just appreciate you being willing to jump on with us and share a lot of that wisdom and knowledge that you've got. Definitely.
Yeah.
So if folks are like, okay, this Shannon guy, I need to figure out more what he's got as far as this real estate space and the teamwork and the partnerships and all that. You mentioned about your podcast, but what are the best ways? You're very active on socials and that type of thing. Where are the best place for people to learn more about Shannon?
The easiest place, I mean, you got to remember, I'm just a dumb contractor, but the easiest place for me to remember that is at shannonrobnett.com. You can go there. I've got a book list. I've got a book I'll send you. You can see what we're doing. You can see, you can get involved in my podcast, listeners there. You can also get on my calendar. I'd love to have take a minute, get to know you, see what your investment goals are, see what I can do to shed knowledge on that. Love to give you 15 minutes of my time just to get to know you. And so it's just shannonrobnett.com. And, if you punch it into Google, you'll find it. And I'd love to connect with your listeners for sure.
Well, folks, take Shannon up on that. As you mentioned, we've met each other just a little less than 2 years ago. And I'll never forget when we did meet. It's just been a lot of fun. Every time we get a chance to be in the same room together, it's just like we just catch up, like we've been long lost friends. Yeah. It's just a blast. So take him up on that. He sincerely means that. Follow Shannon. He's very knowledgeable in the real estate space, in the business space, in the leadership space, in all of it. He's the guy. So if you're looking for ways to increase your knowledge and your education, I highly recommend going to shannonrobnett.com and getting on any list that he's got, following him on the socials, and definitely increasing your education as we move forward. So Shannon, dude, this has been fun. I appreciate your time today. I look forward to doing this again sometime soon, and the next time we get a chance to meet up at the next conference for sure.
Absolutely, Randy. Honor and pleasure to join you.
Excellent. So folks, go out there, have a fantastic day. I hope you found value in this episode. And until the next time we get together, have a great day now. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me on the Rich Mind Podcast. I hope you found a ton of value in this episode. If so, I'd really appreciate a 5-star review. And you can also share it with your family and friends. And as my mentor Jim Roden shared with me, in order to have more, you must first become more. And in order to become more, you must work harder on yourself than you do on your job. So go out there today and work harder on yourself to become more and build the life of your dreams. Until next time, my friends.